Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're calling from today. My name is Spencer Ruckty. I'm the author events manager here at Third Place Books in Seattle, Washington. I'm calling you from the stock room of our Seward Park location, which is in South Seattle. We are here with our friends from Community Bookstore in Brooklyn, and we are so happy to have the Danish author Ida Jessen and Anne Michaels with us today. The topic of today's conversation is A Postcard for Annie, translated by Martin Aitken. First of all, I want to invite you to, if you're in the chat, to say hello, let us know where you're calling in from. And while you're doing that, I will just say that one of the true silver linings of the pandemic is working with bookstores all across the country to host virtual readings like the one you'll be seeing today. Third Place Books is happy to be joined by Community Bookstore in Brooklyn, a fellow supporter of translated literature in America. So thank you to Noah Mintz at Community Bookstore, and thank you to Archipelago Books, a vital institution in this country for international literature. Both Community Bookstore and Third Place Books have great events coming up. On August 9th, we will be teaming up yet again along with Powell's and Seminary Co-op in Chicago to host a virtual conversation between Jesse Ball and Max Porter for Jesse's memoir, Auto Portrait. And then again on August 20th, we'll be teaming up for a conversation with Brenda Lozano and with her translator, Heather Cleary, for a discussion of their new novel, Witches. You can visit our websites, thirdplacebooks.com or communitybookstore.net to learn more about our stores and to sign up for our email newsletters so you never miss out on another author reading. As mentioned, the chat window is open at the bottom of your screen, and we encourage you to use it respectfully. During the last 15 minutes or so of tonight's program, we will also have time for your questions. So if you have questions for our authors this evening, please submit those in the Q&A window below, which is separate from the chat window at the bottom of your screen. We also offer closed captioning for those who are interested. Just click the live transcript button at the bottom of your window to turn this feature on or off. A reminder that this event will be recorded, so if you miss anything, we'll be emailing a recording to everyone who registered. And of course, you can order a postcard for Annie from Third Place Books or Community Bookstore, or just drop by your local store. Conversations like this one are intentionally free and open to the public. Every purchase you make supports the future of our author series, so thank you. And now, without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Ida Jessen made her literary debut in 1989 with the collection of short stories Untersten. She is a translator and the author of fiction and children's books that have won the Egholt Prize, the Albert Dam Grant, the Jytte Borberg Prize, the Danish Booksellers Golden Laurels, and more. A Postcard for Annie earned her a second nomination for the Nordic Council Prize. She is also a recipient of the Lifetime Award from the Danish Arts Foundation. And in 2019, Archipelago Books published Jessen's A Change of Time, also translated by Martin Aitken, a novel that book form called a masterpiece of the epistolary novel. Joining Ida in conversation is Anne Michaels, the Canadian novelist and poet. Her books are translated to more than 50 languages and have won dozens of international awards, including the Orange Prize, the Guardian Fiction Prize, the Lannan Award for Fiction. Among many other honors, she is a Guggenheim Fellow and has served as Toronto's Poet Laureate. Her novel Fugitive Pieces was the winner of the 1997 Orange Prize for Fiction, now known as the Women's Prize in the UK, and was adapted into a feature film in 2007. Her most recent books include the poetry collection All We Saw, the book-length essay Infinite Gradation, and Rail Tracks, co-written with John Berger. This afternoon, the topic is Martin Aitken's wonderful translation of A Postcard for Annie. In a review for the collection, Malcolm Forbes at the Star Tribune writes that, quote, whether they are facing predicaments, making difficult emotional choices, or just watching their lives unravel, Jessen's heroines earn our sympathy. Martin Aitken's sure-footed translation conveys their plight and allows us to grasp Jessen's astute observations and appreciate her beguiling prose. We are so pleased to have these two storied authors with us today. I will now pass the screen over to Ida and Anne. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would just like to say that a huge thank you to Spencer, Third Place Books, Community Bookstore, of course, the amazing Archipelago Books. And every time we gather together this way to listen, to talk, It's an act of hope. And it is personally a great pleasure to be talking again with Ida. I'm so pleased we can meet together this way again.
So am I.
I think what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, maybe just ask you right off the top to read a bit to us, so we can fall into your voice, and it will bring us all to the same place. So there were two places that you mentioned, and I'm wondering if the excerpt, She Wakes Thomas, whether you might read that, if that's all right, or anything else you'd like.
Yes. Maybe you won't understand so much anyway, whatever I read, because I'm going to read it in Danish. Yes. And I'll only read a very little bit, just to hear the Danish voice. Hun vækker Thomas, og han sætter sig op i sengen med et ryg. Hvad er der? Malte er ikke kommet hjem. Han udstøder et tungt suk. Vi kan ikke bure ham inde, Lisbeth. Han er en voksen mand. Så voksen er han altså heller ikke. Kom i seng igen, siger Thomas. Ved du godt, hvad klokken er? Den er over 2, og vi skal på tur i morgen. Han er 20 år, Lisbeth. Tænk på dig selv. Hvad lavede du, da du var 20?
Thank you. This book is, like everything you've written, complex and emotionally precise. It is also deeply bleak. And there's the one question, the overwhelming question that I had when I read this book was, in these stories, love does not console, it does not repair, it does not prevent the violence that occurs. So one might say, what good is love? Mm-hmm. What is it at all effective? What use is it? And yet, so the question is, how does love work in these stories? How is love effective?
Well, I think that love in these stories is some kind of helplessness in the people loving. It is something they can't help but doing. And in the story that I just read a little bit from, it's called Mother and Son, and it's about a mother who has a husband and 2 sons, and her eldest son has ADHD. That's what it's called in America too. Yes. And her son has always been full of trouble, and the short story opens up a night when she's together with her whole family, and she's so full of love and joy, and she just wants to touch her son, and she knows she can't do it, and she's helpless in her emotions because love always flows to her, and it is also an enemy of hers, and but it is still the way of her. It's the way of her to love, and in other stories, it is like a hope that makes you unfree. Not for this mother, and I've just read something by the great Norwegian writer called Sigrid Undset. She won the Nobel Prize in the 20s, 100 years ago, and she writes, I just read that today, to be another is not a job. It is I like the words. It means jobs. It means you have to work to be a mother, but it's not a job. It's not a work. She says a job or a work is something that you want to be successful, but a father or a mother doesn't have to get success with their children. They can cry their eyes out and still not want it in any other way. And that's the difference of being a mother or having a job. So that's the way it is for this woman. But there are other stories between a woman and her husband, where it is like she's always hoping for him to come near to her. And this hope of hers is a way of getting stuck, because she's waiting and waiting and waiting and hoping and hoping and hoping. And she thinks, if he could say to me he doesn't love me, I would be free. But he won't do it. She knows that. Yeah.
I think that you know, the love between husband and wife, the love between mother and child, between father and child, these, in this book, what's so powerful, what's so moving, what's so terrifying is that in terms of what happens, in terms of events, the love is powerless. But the one thing that is certain among in all the stories is that it endures, the love endures, so that no matter you know, the brutality, the moments of brutality and violence that occur, nevertheless, love somehow endures. But it's a very dark universe in these stories. And I wonder, I know that you wrote this was published there 10 years ago. So you are revisiting something that's a decade old. And I want to talk about that experience of coming back to look at this book after a decade. But what was the experience of writing it? Because you have put first of all, was it written quickly, all at once, over a long period of time, a short period of time? Because you're immersed in a world that's articulating something extremely distressing. You know, you're putting your finger on that nerve where love fails in the moment. And so what was that like, living in that universe?
Well, let me answer you in a very personal, almost private way, because of course it is massive, this focus on this helplessness of love. And I had a divorce 2 years before that. And I think that I had been, I had felt bad for a couple of years, and I had not wanted to write, and I didn't know what to turn to, or who I was, or anything. And then something happened. I was invited to a church in Copenhagen to have not a speech, but I was going to lead songs for the evening, where we were just going to sing together, and I was going to motivate the songs. And after that, I was invited out by the priest for a dinner, and we talked for 4 hours. And after that, I went home and I wrote this book, A Postcard for Annie, in approximate 14 days or 3 weeks. And I did nothing but write in those days. And what had made me do that, I think that was because that during those 4 hours, I had a very strong feeling that I had met a human being that I understood in a way where I thought that I knew him. and I knew that life hadn't been so pretty for him either, and he was full of faults too. And well, it was some kind of release of emotions. And today we are married, and so you have met him as you did a couple of years ago, and I'm very happy that I wrote this book, because, well, there are several kinds of love, and this kind of love that is in A Postcard for Annie is certainly a way of loving that I know. But yeah, well, it was almost private, but you asked for it.
No, I'm so glad, because this book has a power to it, which is a power of being able to sustain that look into that difficult, complex place, and it sustains it throughout each story. So my instinct when I read it, the writer instinct, I guess, is that it must have been of a piece. It must have been written, all at once, or very, very close in time, each story. And so in a way, what you're saying is that, would you say that these stories allowed that second marriage, because it gave precise expression to something that maybe before that was inarticulate, and that inarticulation is despair, I think. It's that darkness, right?
Yeah.
So being able to articulate, I think, is, even when the articulation is so painful, is a gift is a release.
I think you're right. Yes, I think it was the way into this very happy love of mine. Yeah, writing these stories. Yes, and
it's
still.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
And still feeling compassion for these women, not saying, well, your love is not the right kind of love, but feeling their bleeding hearts.
Yes. Yes, especially the mother love, which is, I think, very, very hard to write. And I think there are very few examples really in literature that take you into that precise place. I keep using the word precise because it's an articulation of something which we don't read very often. That kind of mother love, that expression of mother love. And it's, because as you were saying at the beginning, it is a task. It enters your body as a mother. You don't choose it. It's not something that you can throw off or claim. It is simply that your body changes to become the mother. And so this sense of absolute purpose, but also ineffectiveness is such a painful bond and binding in that story, in those stories. So very powerful. And I'm very personally very glad to know that outside of the realm of those stories, there's a great happiness.
Yes,
so that is good to know.
Thank you.
And our readers will be happy to know that. I want to. So we touched a little bit on looking back now after 10 years and reading in translation this book, and so what's your perspective on these stories? And I want to talk a little bit about what you've been doing in this last decade. But
yes. Well, I've been busy in many ways until the COVID came, when I felt like my brains closed down in some ways, and it was a loss of abilities, this closing down. But until then, I was a very busy woman, writing books and being the wife of a vicar, and loving that, with lots of people coming in our home, and many things going on in our home, and lots of people around our tables. And sometimes I just had to flee out of Copenhagen, and I had my small house in Sorø, where I went out, I drove out there. I said to my husband, I have to be in absolute peace and calm now, and I can't take any more people. And then I went to this small house of mine where there was a garden, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. So I wrote a book called A Change of Time, which we've been talking about, and there was a sequel to that. A Change of Time is a historical novel about a teacher coming in 1904 to a small town in Jutland, and her marriage with a very distant doctor. And the sequel is the voice of this very distant doctor. And we hope it will be published in America too. And then I've written a huge novel called The Captain and Barbara, which is now going to be a film, which is also going to be released in America, I think. So maybe, yeah. And I've been writing essays too, which I know that you've done that too. Yes. Mm.
Yes. So writing the sequel to A Change of Time, to go back into that marriage and write from the husband's point of view, what was the impulse to do that? Did you feel that? Sorry, go ahead. Did you feel that he had not been heard in that first book?
Yes, and his voice was so strong in my head. And then the impulse was my mother, and she asked me, Ida, couldn't you write a book about the Dr. Bagge, because he's such a strange man? And then I said to her, well, Mommy, I can do that, but I'm not sure I am able to explain him or know him truly. And then she told me the story of a writer in Denmark called Martin A. Hansen, who once told, when he was going to his, what is it called when you go to the vicar in order to, you are 13 or 14 years old and you are going to go through a ceremony in the church. Yeah. And then the vicar took those pupils in the church, and he was going to show them the old font where you christen the children, and he was going to explain it to them. And the only thing he said was, isn't that strange? Isn't that strange? And Martin A. Hansen never forgot that. And so my mother encouraged me to write about what you don't understand in that way. And I'm very fond of my mother, and she's always been an inspiration for me in that way, because she's able to say, in a very short way, she's going to say very important things to me. What I had to do was to get so close to him that I could hear his own voice. And at first I thought I was going to write about him in the third person, and I tried to do that, but then I had the wrong view on him, and it was as if I could finish him off in 4 sentences, concluding, you are autist. Is that what is called Asperger, or as and a diagnosis?
Oh yes, yes,
yeah,
yes,
yes,
like
yes.
autistic.
Yeah, autistic. Yes.
Yeah.
So that was, and well, you don't write a novel that way, you know. So I had to give him his own voice, and he is a man of duty. So I dressed up as an editor of a doctor's editorial, and asked him to write about his memoir for this editorial. And as a man of duty, he had to do that. So that was my way into his brains and his way of thinking. And so many people has asked me if he is a homosexual, and I've always asked him, I don't know. I have asked him, and he didn't want to tell me anything about it. So that's the truth. So when you write about people and you make fictional stories, it is in many ways like meeting people for real. You have to pay respect and not come near, but not trying to push them, and not trying to make them say things they don't want to, because then the story will stop or collapse or be like a cliche. So if you want to make it feel like real life, you have to treat your fictional characters like they were real, and that's what makes it so exciting, I think. That you have to get away all your thoughts on how people are, and your, I don't know the English word, but you sometimes when you meet somebody, you can think, oh, he's like that and he's like that, and he's, but you should never think like that. You have to be open if you want to know somebody.
I completely agree with you, and that respect is so evident in what you write, because we have to respect the privacy, the most intimate parts of our characters, and they will reveal themselves to us in a way that is honest. So what we don't know is a reflection sometimes of what the character does not know about themselves, and it leaves that unknowing, which is also a part of us. So that's a very valuable thing to try and maintain and build into a character, and you do that so well. Was your mother satisfied by the doctors?
Well, when she got the book, she had hard times, as a matter of fact, because my father was very old and he got sick, and so she just read it again this winter, and then by then my father was dead, and she had some time by herself, and then she said, well, Ida, that was a very nice book, thank you. So
yes.
So,
you mentioned a historical novel, and that is being made into a film. Has a film been made already?
No, it's going to be a film right now in a month.
And so researching in that way, I imagine that was a total immersion. You were immersed completely into that research.
Yes.
How was that experience for you?
Well, it was strange writing about the middle of the 18th century, because you know so very little about how people were thinking at that time. And the only thing I knew was that they didn't know freedom the way we do now, because the system in Denmark was very hard and the peasants were subdued, and there was a military and there was a king, and it was all very strict. And I had many thoughts on that. And at the end, I decided that I was not going inside anybody's head, but just going to actions and what they said. So what they said and what they did. So that was like a dogma, or is that what we call it? A dogma?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. So that was narrowing, but it was also widening things up, because I work from inside and out, and now I was working from outside and in, and it was very exciting for me, and I did a lot of of research. And I live in a very small town. We have moved out of Copenhagen, and there's a library here which is based on books from the 18th century. So I was at the sources of the science of that time, of growing crops, of growing the moors, which is the case in this book. So I was reading so many things, and after a year I was completely filled up to here, and I thought, well, I don't know what to do about all these details. So I don't know how and in the end, I was so despaired on what I had read. But I got somehow I got the power to throw all the research away and then go to the story, because that's what I have to do. Stow away all these pencil case knowledge and the proper work, and then just being in many ways just go for it without thinking too much, just finding the voice you want to tell in, and then letting it's like some wave of energy you have to ride on, or well, yeah, you know, I guess.
Yes, it's so interesting and good to hear you say. This is exactly why I asked this question, because the immersion into character that you have done, such a powerful listening to the character, and so with historical fiction, it's a different thing. So to hear you say, well, I showed through action, through gesture, through what the people said, and allowing the honesty of that to come through, rather than, as you say, telling the story from the inside out of these characters. That makes absolute sense. And it's also, it's an interesting question of authority. What do we have the authority to write about?
Yes, that's always the main question. Do I have the authority of writing this? I remember the first novel I wrote with a male character as the main character, and I didn't feel that I had the authority to write it, and the writing was not good. I had the story, I had the character, I had everything, but I didn't have the voice, because I was so much in doubt of my own authority. And then I found out, if I installed myself in his little loving sister, who doesn't talk about herself. There are only once or twice or three times during this whole book that the word I is pronounced, but just that I had the knowledge that it was her telling, even though she tells so much that she doesn't know, so that you forget she's there. But then I had the authority of writing. So yeah.
The perfect solution to write out of a voice that within the story has no authority.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that it's always a very, even though that you know that you have to find a voice with authority, it's not an easy task to find that.
It's extremely difficult, of course, and it's the heart of it though. Without that freedom to speak, you can't tell the story the way it should be told, the way it needs to be told. But it's interesting, you know, with so you wrote this historical novel. I want to ask you about the filming of it a bit and whether how much you are involved in it. But it was a question of authority. I'm going to go somewhere else first. And that you mentioned also writing a collection of essays. And there's another form of authority that is very, very different. And I think also perhaps we need to reach a certain point in our own work to claim that authority, the authority of the essay.
Yes.
So how was that for you to move into that form, to speak as the I in the essay?
It was the first time I have written I, and it was me. So it was a huge jump because there was no dressing, and I didn't say private things, but just to write I. Well, it was a great relief too, and I think that it has shown me a way to something that also interests me just as much as writing fiction, which is fantastic, because I'll soon be 58, and I'm not. Well, I've been writing fictions for 30 years, and it's such a fantastic thing when you find out, well, you can go another way, you can walk another direction if you want to. And it is also a great challenge to walk that way, and there will be more steps to go down that way. So, and I like the way of writing essays where it's the I that binds together everything, and you can go after your associations, and you're free to do whatever you want. Yes. It just has to be a little bit, it just has to be founded in a thought that you don't even have to be fully aware of. So
yes, it's a way of learning what you do know, you know.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good way of saying it, and it's a way of summing up what you have used your life on, which is nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a little like, you know, I think when we type something or write it on the screen, perhaps someone would say, well, it's easier to lie that way, to be dishonest. But when you're writing in your own hand with your own pen, and you're doing the writing, your own handwriting, it's harder to lie. It's harder to lie. So the essay, in a sense, is holding the pen yourself and writing that truth.
Yes.
So when they came to you to make this film, were you tempted to write the screenplay? Did you write the screenplay, or did you say, not for me?
I said not for me, because I had tried before several times, people wanting to make a film, and nothing came of it. So, and that was when I was younger, when I had some expectations, and when they came this time, I could feel, well, this was different, because they were very full of intent, and I have not even met the director, and he has asked me so many times, and I have an agent, and I just call my agent and I say, please tell him no, I'm looking forward to seeing the film. And so they sent me the manuscript, and I read 4 lines, and then I closed it again, because I thought, I'm just going to say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But it's another way of making art, and it's another genre, and it's another art form. So it would be like a historian saying to me, it is wrong, it is wrong, it is wrong of what I have written. So yeah, even though I don't think my novel, there's so many mistakes in it, but but a little bit maybe. But no, you have made a film too. So
Yes.
what did you do?
Well, I think that your decision was the right decision, and that I made the same decision. So, but there was a great effort to involve me more than I was comfortable in being involved, and I think it is very important to step back and let that other art form be what it is, because you would have to have such an intimate involvement. It would have to be an overwhelmingly 100% involvement, not a partial involvement where you don't really have any power.
No, you don't have any power.
So it's too frustrating, just so frustrating. Yeah. So better to step back. I'm very pleased though, and it will be wonderful. And what an experience to come to the theater, like everyone else. And
I'm going to buy myself a new nice dress.
Yes, excellent.
Yes,
that's essential.
Yes.
We've been joined again, I think.
Hello.
Hi Spencer.
Yeah.
Hello,
Hey.
Spencer. Hi again.
It has been so lovely to listen to this conversation in the background. I just want to thank you, Ida, and thank you, Anne, for doing this with us today. I have returned to speak on behalf of the audience. We have a few questions in our Q&A box right now. The first of which is from Sarah, who says, I cannot thank you enough for this wonderful collection of stories. Each one was a punch in the stomach in a good way. In other words, each story stopped and made me think. I had to take a couple of days to enjoy each of them, to let them sink in. And let's see, I very much enjoyed how some of the stories, in particular, December is a cruel month and also an excursion. And the last one in my hometown also leaves the freedom to decide what has happened or what happens next to the reader. What was it your intention to do so?
With in my hometown?
I think, I think in my hometown, yeah.
As a matter of fact, well, now I am asking, and I'm answering quite privately also on this question. It was something that I experienced. It was a great uncle of mine who I had known for many years, and his wife as well. She died, and I came to the funeral, and then there was a woman who was so very much like my great aunt who had died, and then I heard it was her daughter, which we had never known.
Wow.
They had met each other at a cashier in a shop, and they had stood behind each other in the line, and then the cashier desk man, or what do you call it, he had said, well, you are certainly mommy and daughter, you can't run away from that. And they had looked at each other, and well, it was, and the child had been adopted away when the mother was very young and before she met my great uncle. And I couldn't use that part in the story because it was almost plastic fantastic that they had met each other that way in a shop, and a stranger had said to them, well, you must be mother and daughter because you look like each other so much. So I had to write down that
Wow.
that story, but I had to minimize the drama in it, because well, at that time at least I wasn't able to write it so that it wouldn't be too much.
Wow. Sarah, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for your very nice words on the book. Thank you.
Yeah, for those of you watching, yeah, keep submitting those questions, and I will continue to read them off. We have a question here. Let's see. The attendee asks, in the United States, Martin Aitken is known as the Norwegian translator of Karlova Knausgård, but has also been acclaimed recently for his translation of Olga Ravn's The Employees, which was, Olga is a Danish writer. I can personally vouch for this novel. It's an excellent, unnerving book. Can you talk about what it was like working with Martin Aitken over the course of 2 books?
Yes, I can, because I know Martin very well. He lives only a mile from me here in this small town, and we have known each other for many years, and I've always had so great respect for him. So when Archipelago bought my first book, I asked for them to let Martin Aitken do the translation, and they knew Martin,
yeah,
of course, and they asked him, and he said yes, and I was very happy about it. And the way we work together is that I say nothing, and he asks me of nothing. So that's the same as the way we are with the film. I'm a translator myself.
Yeah.
Martin and I share the same view of working as a translator. It is a work you have, of course, that there can be questions you have to ask but Martin has lived in Denmark for so many years. He knows, he's fluent in Danish, and he knows the way of living, and he knows the culture here, and so he doesn't have to ask me for anything, and I trust him entirely. So it was so funny when I got the book, A Postcard for Annie, and I read it through, and I was very happy, and I knew I would be. So there's a great trust between us. So it's a very happy cooperation without Operation Co.
Do you find that being a translator yourself also affects the way you write? Like, do you think of how your books in Danish will be translated?
No, but it affects on my on the way I write, in the sense that my books are very what do you call it? They're very, very different. Yes. So I think that translating is like when you are a pianist and you are playing etude. That's a way of translating. It's a way of making your voice elastic, that it can. You can write. You are able to write in many ways. But I never translate things that is not suited for my voice, because of course I have not all that much. My voice isn't that broad. It is. There are several possibilities for my voice, but it is not that broad.
Yeah, interesting. We have an anonymous attendee who asks, has the reception of the book in the US been different from in Denmark? I believe it was over or about a decade ago now. And have there been any surprises in seeing this book or your other books in translation?
Well, I have not seen the reviews yet. But you read from one here in the beginning, and I was happy for that. The reception in Denmark was, as I remember it, overwhelmingly good. Well, yes, it was very good. Yes.
Excellent. And let's see, we have another attendee who she wants to know more about the essay collection that you're working on.
It is as a matter of fact finished now, and it is in Danish called another book I never wrote. And some of the largest essays is on ideas that I worked on for a very long time, but never, they were never turned into books because something happened. So something failed. So there's a very long essay on Judas.
Judas, yeah.
Yes, Judas, and whom I wanted at some time to write a book about, and that was after Amos Oz had written his book Judas, which was highly acclaimed in Denmark, and I read it and I thought it was so bad, and I thought that there must be another way to do this. Well, that no offense, I really love and adore Amos Oz, but not that book. And there's a long essay on a Danish writer called Sten Stensen Blicher, who lived lived temporarily with Emily Bronte, and he gave Denmark the I in fiction. The untrustworthy I, the person saying I, and you are not able to trust this I.
Yeah, they call it the unreliable narrator.
The unreliable narrator, which he introduced in Danish literature in 1842. So yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So
and what was the name of that author?
Sten Stensen Blicher is his name. I think maybe something of him has been translated into. He only writes short stories into English. He must be.
Yeah. Fascinating. I'll look that up. Well, those are all the questions we have from the audience. Ida, Anne, do you have any last remarks before we head out?
Yeah, I want to say to Anne that it was a huge pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for your questions, that because you know so much, and you go directly to what it is all about, and that has been very nice. So thank you, and thank you to you, Spencer, and seeing you in Seattle in your storage room, and the book of Stalin lying behind you. And
I know the Stalin biography is really sticks out. I noticed in the middle of this.
Yeah, but thanks, and thank you to the audience and for the questions, for your very good and yes, for your very good questions. Thank you. It's been a pleasure for me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for speaking, yes, to the heart of everything. I very selfishly would like to ask one more question if we have time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And woman to woman, writer to writer, human being to human being. These last few years have changed everything. The world is a different world. And how can you articulate, is it possible yet to articulate what that means in terms of how you write?
Yes,
how we write, how we read.
That's one of the questions that I asked in my collection of essays. How do you continue? How do you go on? Because it's one thing to begin, and you always in Denmark talk about the difficult number 2, but there's also the difficult number 20 or 22, and the difficult number 30. And as the world changes and you are no longer young, and you maybe isn't the voice of your time, even though that time matters so much for you, how do you go on? And I have no answer to that question, but I have the question, and I think that I would like to ask you, how do you go on?
Well, it is the question. It is the question. And for me, it's I've been thinking about it for a long time now. And as you say, it is a question without an answer in some ways. But for me, the only way to keep going is to say to myself, well, what is the most fundamental, the most essential, elemental things that we need to hear, or that we that we need to speak aloud. In order to, we can't grasp what this time is. I don't think we are so immersed in it. We cannot understand, because we are at a time of absolute change, fundamental changes. So, but what is fundamental that remains? What can we speak of? And so when you no longer are trying to grapple with events as the current events, the state of things, to try and see ahead, but really sit with, where am I right at this moment, and what do I need to hear myself?
Mm-hmm.
You proceed from this very small place, and but trying to grasp the larger picture, we won't have any understanding of that for a long time.
No, and but it what it takes a lot of self-confidence in the middle of your doubt to be able to take your small corner of the world and say, that is what I can say, and doing that while so many very important things are going on that we are not able to talk about. But we human beings are forever human beings. So yeah.
What is that universal? What are those universal things that can be said? There are. It's very difficult to listen to that depth where you can say, what do we need to know? What do we need to know about each other? What do we need to know? Because I think that's the sort of the deepest current which connects everything. But it's madness, it's chaos right now. Urgent, and difficult.
Urgent is urgent, and urgent has a tendency to overrule importance. So
yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. Just as opinion seems to override thought these days.
Yes.
But yes, it's right. True.
Yeah. Thank you, Anne.
Anyway, thank you. A tremendous pleasure. As always.
Thank you for your answer.
Okay. And I wish everyone well.
Yeah, everyone have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us and for supporting translated literature most of all. It's really wonderful and inspiring to see authors like this, in a virtual space, and to be able to connect people from all over the planet. So thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your Saturday.
Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.